Today's talk is about World War II, so I just wanted to give you a little background about the war in case you need to hear it. World War II was a global conflict that began in 1939 with when Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Very quickly, Hitler dominated much of Europe with harsh and ugly force, bringing fear, destruction, hunger, tremendous loss of life. Families across Belgium, Holland, France, and many other nations were suddenly caught in the path of a power that seemed unstoppable. Millions suffered, and many, especially Jews and other targeted groups, faced persecution and death under the cruelty of the Nazi regime. As the war spread across Europe, Asia, and North Africa, the innocents longed for deliverance. The Allied nations, eventually including the United States in 1941, joined together to resist the Nazi tyranny, and through tremendous sacrifice on battlefields, in the air, in the sea, the Allied forces slowly pushed back the darkness. And by 1945, the Nazi Germany was defeated, and the war finally ended. So as you'll hear from her stories in Holland, my mama is brave. She's a fighter and survivor, and through the adversities of life with the Lord, she has come through them as a light to those around her. I'm very proud of her for being what Paul wrote about himself in Acts 20:24. However, I consider my life worth nothing to me if only I finish the race and complete the task the Lord Jesus has given me, the task of testifying to the gospel of God's grace. And today she's doing that. And by the way, this is Sinterklaas. It's a Dutch holiday where the night before you put out your wooden shoes and to receive gifts. Well, that's if you've been good. And so I have a pamphlet about St. Nicholas, and there's photos and memorabilia over here on this table. The pictures of Mother as a young girl were taken by a Jewish photographer that was harbored by my great aunt, my Opa's sister. And so take a look at those. And then it's my Opa's real wooden shoes. He lined them with carpet because obviously wooden shoes are horribly uncomfortable. But you had them if you didn't have money for leather. You had, so thanks, Kim. You can take it over.
So we decided to do this interview style because Mady said, you'll have to keep me on track because I can just talk and talk and talk. So we wrote down several questions as we practiced talking about what she would like to share. Here comes our mic. The first question, Mady, is where and when were you born?
I was born in 1933, a couple of years ago. I was born in Belgium, in the town of Blankenberge, which is Flemish for white mountains, because the dunes, the sand is so white that they call it white sands, white mountains. And what was the question?
See? And what year were you born?
Yeah, I already said that in 1933.
Then never mind. I just don't need one more detail. I don't think I can hold it in my head. The next question is, what work were your parents doing then when you were born?
Well, my father came from the Netherlands, where he was born, and he was a painter. Not like Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was a house painter, but Papa was an artist. And he came to Belgium to see my mother, who had moved there from the Netherlands. And they stayed there, and they built a hotel on the seacoast of Belgium, in Knokke. And that's where we were living when the Nazis came and overran our country. Papa had warned his friends, he had many Jewish friends, and he had told them, get out of Dodge if you can, because Hitler is a dangerous man, and he had forespelled everything that was going to happen. But many of us, you don't think something horrible like that is going to happen. But the hotel was just a small hotel, and we lived upstairs of the hotel. And one day, we heard this roar, and Papa ran to the window, and he went, "Oh no, it has happened." And I was 6 years old at the time, and I ran after Papa to the window, and a plane just barely cleared the top of the hotel, the roof. And I looked up, and there was a swastika painted underneath the belly of the plane. It was the Nazis who had invaded our country. And then just shortly after that, we started hearing bombing. Our hotel was close to the airport, and we heard the Nazis bombing our airport. And then because our hotel was the closest to the airport, the Belgian army and the French army, they had combined their forces. They took our hotel and made it a first aid station. And one of the French colonels, we call him a colonel over there, he came to Papa and he said, "You cannot be this, you cannot continue living like this. Go to France. France will never fall." Well, as you all remember, France was the first one to go belly up. But, who knew better than a French colonel? So Papa and Mama and my grandfather and my great aunt and I, we escaped to France. Papa's goal, his hope was to go to the coast of France, to go to Le Havre, where they had ships, and go from France to England, and then from England to America. He had always wanted to go to America, even when he was a teenager. And so we got on that train, and we got out in Le Havre, and we went to the quay, and we saw the last boat that was leaving France, the last free boat that was going to England. And we saw the plumes in the distance. We just missed the boat. And Papa, one of the times that I saw my father cry was then, because he knew what terrible things were waiting for us. So we decided to go to the south of France, close to the Spanish border, and we stayed there for about maybe 6 months, 8 months. It was called Montauban. It was in the south of France. And we lived there on the property of a baron who needed some help. So Mama, my mother, who had a cook and a cleaning lady and all kinds of help in her hotel, who was the boss of it all of a sudden became the cleaning lady. And my father helped the baron on his land. And things got really bad, even down in France. There was no food, and we went to the Red Cross. The Red Cross wasn't able to help us. So Papa said, well, let's go back to Belgium. It can't be any worse than it is here. And we were actually eating mushrooms out of the forest because there was no food. And there were grapes because he had vineyards. So we ate mushrooms and grapes most of the time. So anyway, we packed back up and we wanted to go back to our home. But by then, the Nazis had taken possession of the whole Belgian seaside, because, as you well know, their plan was to go across England and to invade England. So they would not let us go back to our home. We were not allowed to go to that seaside. They would not let us go in. So then Papa said to Mama, well, I still have some relatives in Holland, let's go to Holland. And that was another mistake, because if you remember, Holland was one of the last countries to be liberated by the Allies. But we went to Holland and we stayed there. And my uncle, who was living there, gave us a place to stay. He owned a what do you call when you own several stores? A chain, thank you. He owned a chain of clothing stores, and he would sell jeans to the working people the Nazis had sent them to go to work on the railroads and on the roads and things like that. And so they went to my uncle to buy jeans to do that job. And the jeans were probably, let's say $5 back then. But my uncle charged him $8 or more. And he said, why not? These people they don't need their money. They're not coming back. And he was right. They weren't coming back, because they were overworked and underfed, and very few ever came back from those labor camps. But he was supposed to be a Christian, you know? And here he was charging his fellow people who were going to this horrible working for the enemy. He was charging them extra. So Papa told him, he said, you know, you may give a lot of money to the church, and you may think you're a very important person, but he said, you're not a Christian. He said, you're an awful man. Well, my uncle did not like that, so Papa got fired.
So share about your father's involvement with the resistance movement after that.
Well, after that, we went to another village. It was called Rijswijk. And the reason we went there is because Mama's sister lived there. And so after we got situated, a friend of my aunt, who he had known the family for several years, but he was a member of the Dutch Parliament, and he was also very active in the resistance against the Nazis. And so he helped Papa. He made sure that we had enough money to eat. He would take Papa's paintings and he would sell them on the black market. And the reason it was called the black market is because back then, you could not be a dancer or a singer or a painter unless you joined the Nazi Party. And if you didn't, then you were not allowed to do that. So, of course, Papa wouldn't join the Nazi Party, but he kept on painting. And because of that, his paintings that he painted in Europe were not dated. Because if anybody ever got a painting from him and it was dated, and then the Nazis found out that he was painting without being a Nazi, he could be thrown in jail. So anyway, this gentleman that my parents knew, the member of parliament, he was very active in the resistance, and he asked Papa if Papa would join, and Papa, of course, yes, he would join. And so Papa's job was, he had a crawl space underneath the house where he would listen to the radio. He would listen to the BBC, the British Broadcasting Company. And it was, of course, in English, but Papa could understand English, and he would translate the messages. Then he would translate the messages and have them printed, and then people would distribute these messages all over Europe, not all over Europe, but all over the Netherlands, so that people in Holland would know the truth. No, your queen isn't dead. She's alive. She's in London. She's safe. No, the Americans don't, it isn't that they don't care. They are fighting for us. They're going to save us. They're going to help us. So it was very important that he did that. They always went in pairs to distribute these pamphlets. There was a suitcase filled with them. So they would go out at night, and then one night, as he and his partner were walking to their job, Nazi soldier walked out from the dark, and he pointed his gun at Papa and his partner, and he said, "Wie gehst?" which means "who goes there" in German. So they showed him their identification, and Papa almost had to chuckle because he could tell what the Nazi was thinking, because the Nazi didn't realize that Papa and his partner they didn't have a gun with them, they were unarmed. So the Nazi figured, well, if I shoot Papa, his partner will shoot me, or vice versa, you know. So he let them go. But before he let them go, he said to Papa, what do you have in this suitcase? And Papa looked at the Nazi and he said, "Bibles." And the Nazi nodded, and he looked at Papa and he said, "You can go." So then when Papa came home, Mama was crying. She said, "You know, I know that you have to do this for your country, but every night that you go out, I don't know if you're going to come back. And I don't know if, you know, my little girl's going to have a dad. I can't take this anymore. I just can't. You go and do your job, but I'm going to live with my sister till it's over with." And so Papa had to decide whether he could live without Mama for the rest of the war, and he couldn't. So he told them that he could no longer do this. And his partner, instead of waiting for a new partner, he just wanted so badly to get these pamphlets to the people. He did not wait for a new partner. He went out by himself the next night. And they were waiting for him. Just about the same point where they had been stopped before, 3 Nazis stepped out and stopped him, arrested him, and put him in a concentration camp, where they tortured him horribly. In the same concentration camp, his brother-in-law was also a prisoner, and he survived. And so after the war, he was able to tell his sister what happened to her husband. And Papa always said that he wished that he could have given the message to that lady and saying, you know, yes, your husband died, but he died bravely. And they shot him immediately. He didn't suffer. You know, he held up the flag and said, "Long live the Netherlands." But he told the lady how terribly he was tortured. And she never forgave Papa. She never forgave him.
Tell about when the Nazis came for your father, when he was in your home.
Well, excuse me. Before they came to the house, I just want to tell you how bad it was, because they had shut off the electricity, they had shut off the gas, they had shut off the water. There was left one pump was left in the middle of the village, and huge lines were formed with people with buckets and cans just getting the water, and then they had to carry them home. The house was cold, because it gets very cold in the Netherlands, and the Nazis they thought that if they'd made our lives miserable, it would just weaken us, but instead we got stronger, we got angrier, you know. So one night my father and I would go to get some wood. What we did, we went to the graveyard where they had the wooden crosses, and we would actually pull the wooden crosses out and use the wood to heat, to cook with. And when I went with Papa to do that, and when I asked Papa, I said, "Papa, isn't it bad? Don't these people care that we're taking their crosses?" And Papa said, "Oh, no, they don't mind at all. They love helping." And then I was okay, you know. Then if they were okay with giving their crosses, then I was okay taking them. And so we were able to cook our food a little bit. But we weren't able to do it in a regular stove anymore. It's like one of those big cans of the largest cans that you can get tomato juice or canned tomatoes. Papa would open them up and made a little hole in the bottom, and then he would feed his little sticks of wood in there. And then on top there was a little pan, and this is how we would cook our food.
We do that for camping sometimes. Kids will learn how to do that for fun, but this was existence for you.
Right, yeah. So
why did they come for your dad?
Well, the Nazis continued to bleed us dry. One time the edict was everybody had to give up their copper, whatever copper you had, copper pennies, copper, anything there was a faucet, anything that was copper, because they needed it to make their bullets, apparently. So all the citizens would bring go to the village center where the Nazis were collecting this, and they would take down your name and address and then give you a chit for what you had given them. They said that after they won the war all over, we would get our money back for that. But of course, Papa wasn't going to give his copper. Then another month, we were supposed to give them our blankets. They allowed us one blanket per person in a house that was even colder than outside. We would go to bed with our scarves on, our hat on, with our coats on and mittens. This is how we went to bed, with one blanket they allowed us. So everybody gave up their blankets because, they were afraid of the Nazis. Papa said, no, they're not getting my blankets. And then they had to give up their radios because they didn't want us to listen to the BBC. We weren't supposed to, know what was going on. Papa, of course, was not giving up his radio because that was his lifeline, to the BBC, and so he could help the resistance. So Papa's name came up, and they came looking for him because he knew, they found out that he was working with the resistance. So before I tell you this, I have to, we did not think ever that the Nazis would come to our home, but we had made certain, what do you call it? We just wanted to make sure that in case something like this happened, that they, for example, when they would come to a home looking for a man, they would go to the bed, and if there were two warm spots, and the wife said, oh, my husband isn't here, they knew that he was there because there were two warm spots in the bed. And so eventually they would find him. At the table, Mama and I would eat together. And then after Mama was finished eating, Papa would use her plate and her utensils and eat. So if somebody would come to the house, there was only 2 plates on the table. So to show that Papa wasn't around. But we really never thought that it would actually happen. But one morning, they came looking for Papa. And we heard this noise, and they were using the gun butts, trying to open the door, trying to break it open. And Mama went to the door, and she said, I'm getting the key. I'm getting the key. Just a minute. Don't hurt the door. I'm getting the key. And then she ran into the bedroom, got Papa, and put him underground where he was always listening to the radio, and then covered the hole with something so they wouldn't know that he was there. Then she went and opened the door for him, for the Nazis, and they pushed her aside, and they ran into the living room and looked around, and of course he wasn't there. Then one of the Nazi commanding Nazi soldiers walked up to me, and he pointed. It wasn't a gun, but it was just a handgun he had, and he pointed it at me, and he said, "Wo ist dein Vater?" which is in German, "Where is your father?" And I understood, and I said, "Ik weet niet." And this, I just want to tell you how God saved us time and time and time again, because Mama and Papa never warned me. They never instructed me, this is what you need to say, or this is what you cannot say if ever the Nazis come to your house. The Lord just saved me, and he just knew. He just told me what to say. I was not scared at that time. I just looked at the Nazi soldier and I said, "Ik weet niet," which is in German, "Ich weiß nicht," I don't know. So he understood me. And so then he turned to Mama and he said, "I will give your husband 1 hour to report to headquarters. If he doesn't show up within 1 hour, we will come back and get you and the child." And then they started to leave, and I lost it. I started to scream. And my mother has spanked me only one time in my life. I was kind of a naughty child when I was little. She had a little bamboo stick in the corner of the kitchen. And when I got a little bit too bad, she would walk to that corner with, where the little bamboo stick was, where the little switch was. And I'd say, Mommy, I'll be good. So she never laid a hand on me. But when I started to scream, she hit me, just wham, right in my face. And I stopped screaming. I was so shocked. And she said in a very loud voice so that Papa could hear underground, "You cannot cry anymore. It's okay. We're going to be safe. They're leaving. Don't cry. It's okay." So that he could hear. Because if he would have heard me scream, he might have thought that the Nazis were hurting me, and he might have, come up from that hole and given himself up. So anyway, they left. And then, as scared as we were, we had to actually laugh because Mama put a kerchief on Papa's head, and she put lipstick on him, and a skirt. The skirt was too little for, and she had to pin it with a safety pin. And lipstick on him. He was the ugliest lady I've ever seen. And we actually, the three of us, just stood there at it, laughing, looking at each other and laughing. And then we got on our bicycle. And this is another thing. The Nazis were so arrogant. They were so sure of themselves. They didn't put a guard there at the house. They just let us go. They knew, they were so sure that Papa would give himself up, in that hour. So we had this hour. We got on the bicycles, and we bicycled out in the country where Mama's sister had a brother-in-law who owned a farm. And we stayed there and slept in the hay for several weeks. I don't know how long, I can't remember how long it was. But I know that we came back to our place. Eventually, the Nazis, I must have thought that we were gone, and they didn't come back. Because when we were liberated, we were in that house.
We'll get to the liberation in a little bit,
Yeah.
and you'll all have to make sure that you watch her face when she tells about Nazis versus talking about the Allies, and I love it. I can see you light up. Tell us the story about how your mother and you got potatoes.
Oh. People were starving in my country. All of you, you've heard about Dutch bulbs, the tulip bulbs and the narcissus bulbs and the hyacinths, but mostly the tulip bulbs. It was a big industry in the Netherlands. The Dutch started to eat their tulips. They were eating their future. It took, after we were liberated, it took years and years to get back our industry because we had eaten the tulips. We started eating sugar beets from in the country. And my aunt, who lived in Amsterdam, she was the one who hid several Jews in her attic in Amsterdam. And because she had this, what do you call it? She knew several people because she was helping the Jews. They still had some food, potatoes, raw potatoes. So Mama got on her bicycle with me in back. I was sitting on a big empty suitcase, and on the way back from Amsterdam, the suitcase was filled with potatoes, only potatoes.
Tell how far she had to ride. Do you remember?
It was about 40 miles by bicycle with a big fat little girl on the back.
And 40 pounds of potatoes.
And how many potatoes? On the way to Amsterdam, we had almost an accident. A German plane scooted down out of the sky and almost hit us, just whoosh, like this. Scared me so much. I jumped off the bicycle, and the bicycle fell down, and Mama fell down. And I don't know whether they just wanted to see whether it was really just two, a woman and a child, or what was, or maybe they were just trying to scare us. And they did. And so Mama told me, she said, no matter what happens, you stay with me, no matter what happens. And so this happened also one time when we went into a forest behind us. We went there to get some wood. Mama had a little axe, and she started to cut down, a little tree. And all of a sudden, there was a German soldier, not a higher up, just an ordinary soldier. And he said, "What are you doing?" And stop. And Mama took me by the hand, and she dropped the wood, and she ran out of that forest with me, holding her little axe up in the air, kind of like the Statue of Liberty does. Because if we had lost the axe, we wouldn't have been able to get any more wood. And again, so many people got shot that way. The Lord saved Mama. The soldier did not shoot us. He kept yelling, "Stop, stop." We didn't. And we got out of the forest and we got free. But we came home without any wood.
What were some experiences at Liberation, and how old were you? I was thinking of the stockings chocolate and the egg.
Oh. I don't know, I can't tell you exactly what month it was, because I was so young at the time. But all of a sudden, the war was over. The Nazis had the Allies had won. The Americans had won. Oh, and I have to tell you one more thing. When I was about 8 years old, I was outside playing, and all of a sudden I heard this sound, and I looked up, and there was pretty high an airplane, an American airplane, but it was burning, and it was kind of, you could tell that it was struggling. And apparently he had gone over to Germany and had gotten shot, and he was trying to get back home. And I don't know whether it was an English plane or an American plane, but it was one of the Allies. And right as I was looking up at the plane, I saw the pilot jump out with a parachute. It opened up. And then the plane came down and burned up. But while he was hanging there under his parachute, the Nazis had a stronghold behind our home, and they shot him. They shot an innocent man hanging there under a parachute. And I saw his body slump forward, and I knew he had died. I was 8 years old, and I learned to hate that day. So, anyway,
So when you saw some American and British tanks,
yeah.
you saw the men.
Yeah, so when we were liberated, the the rooftops of the houses in Holland are way, like that. And somehow we climbed up on those rooftops, and when we saw the planes coming in, our liberators, we all of a sudden the Dutch flags came out that we had been hiding, from the Nazis, and the orange, because our queen was from the House of Orange, and the Nazis did not allow us to wear any orange. And so all of a sudden, all the flags came out, and all the orange, and we were on the rooftop just waving. And then I was there with Mama and Papa, and then one plane came over, and as he was going over our house, he went like this. He said hello.
And they brought gifts. What kind of
And they
gifts
brought
did they
gifts.
bring?
Then the camion, what are the tanks? The tanks came rolling in our village, and I thought they were heroes, and of course they were heroes. But I thought they were old men, because I was only 8, 9 years old. They were just young puppies, just young soldiers, smiling and laughing, and they were so happy because the war was over with, and they were coming into our village. And very cleverly, these young soldiers had brought nylons with them. Back then, the women wore these nylons with the center seam, very, very classy. And they used them to give to the young ladies for their favors. Well, my best friend and I, we wanted nylons for our mamas. So we ran to where the tanks were coming in, and one of them stopped, and Elska and I tried to climb onto the tank, and we went, nylon, nylon. And the soldiers were just laughing at us, and one said, "You're too young." And young in my language is young, so I understood. And then he laughed, and he gave me a big bar of chocolate, which was heaven back then. But I was so sad. I came home with a bar of chocolate, and I gave it to Mama, and I was crying. I said, "Mama, I'm so sorry. I wanted nylon, but they said I was too young." And she said, "Not to cry." She said, "We'll share the chocolate." And she said, "Pretty soon, there'll be nylons all over Holland." So, yeah.
All right. How was God with your family in leaving Belgium and coming to America? And where did you land here?
Well, when we were liberated in Holland, and my parents decided to try to go back to Belgium to see if they could start their hotel again. And the hotel it had not been destroyed, but it was totally emptied. The Nazis, when they were chased out of Belgium by the Allies, they went back to went back to Germany with spoils of war. I had almost life-size teddy bear. It was almost as big as I was. And he was a Steiff, which came from Germany, Steiff, right? And when we came back, of course, Teddy was gone. Some German soldier brought him back to Belgium, brought him back to Germany. And after they left, then the neighbors didn't know whether we were still alive. It had been 5 years. And so they went into the hotel and started helping themselves. They took the radios, they took everything, the linens, the furniture, everything. There was nothing left but just the building itself. and we didn't have the money to start. So then we decided to go to Brussels. I don't know why Papa chose Brussels, but he had been a printer as well, so he started a printing business. And while he was doing that, he started applications to go to America. It took him 2 years. 2 years to fill out forms, one form after another, and we had to go undergo several tests, like a physical test. They didn't want any sickos to come to America back then, you know. And we had to go. We had to have psychiatric tests to make sure that we weren't
That you weren't sickos.
that we weren't crazy. Yeah, they didn't want any sick people. They didn't want any crazy people in America. And also, you had to have a sponsor back then. And you couldn't just come to America back then. So, but Papa had a cousin whose mother was born in the same village in Holland as Papa's father, in Sliedrecht. And so he decided that he would sponsor us. And in 1950, we got on a boat, and I remember Papa standing there on the boat, and we saw the country, you know, get smaller and smaller, and he was waving, and he said, "Goodbye. Goodbye, mijn vaderland, my fatherland." And that's another time that I saw Opa cry. And it was in November, and we were, it was pretty strong winter weather. The ship actually was going like this, just like this. And Papa was talking to the captain of the ship, and the captain said to Papa, "Oh, it's just a little choppy." And Papa said, "A little choppy?" Back then, they didn't have the tables and the chairs fastened like I think they do now. And so whenever the ship would go like this, all the tables would kind of slide to one side of the dining room. Everybody was sick. Everybody was seasick, except one little lady. She had decided that she had paid for her passage, and by gum, she was going to get the food. It was my little mama. 4 feet 10 inches, strong little lady. She was the only one in the dining room eating.
We don't have to ask Mady, how might you be like your mom, right? We know. So when you came to America, where did you land?
Well, we landed in New York, and Papa and I missed the Statue of Liberty because we were sick, you know, in our cabin. But Mama was standing next to she was standing next to the captain of the ship, and she saw the Statue of Liberty. Yeah. And a family of a gentleman and a lady, Jewish people, met us at the ship and showed us New York City. And they were 2 of the people that Mama and my aunt in Amsterdam had saved, and they came to New York. So.
Well, we could keep this going all day, and I want you all to know this is recorded, so you'll be able to see it somewhere on the church website, I guess. But something else that she's been willing to think about is there's so many people who didn't get to come today that we wish could have, but as you see, space is a bit of a problem. So Mady has agreed to maybe have another more informal gathering, maybe this winter. We haven't figured it all out yet, but maybe where she could share more stories. So if you're all interested and you'd like to hear more, pay attention to the bulletin. It'll be there when we get it figured out.
And will we get to eat too then?
Of course we will. Thank you, Mady, for sharing.